For today, I'm gonna be starting seated in Virasana. You're welcome to sit in whatever seated pose is most comfortable for you. You're also gonna need some blankets, maybe a bolster, but just some thick cushions. Since we're gonna do some stuff for the neck and the shoulders, you're gonna need some blocks, and then also have some wall space available. So I have my blue mat lined up to the wall so that you can kind of see a profile shot of what I'll be practicing as we continue with class. So that's a little bit on the props that we'll use today. Starting in Virasana, I'm using a block to sit on and support my hips. The general form in Virasana is that the thighs come together, heels are a little bit wider than the hips, and the block is between the heels. When we come to sit down, if that block wasn't there, essentially we'd be sitting between the heels. So you can use your hands and feel that there's about a hand's distance of space between the hips and the heels. And if you're sitting in Virasana, take a moment to just observe your feet. Observe if they're turned out towards the side walls or if the outer foot is lifting up towards the ceiling. As you pick up your big toe and pull it towards your hips, try to line up the middle toe with the center of your heel. If you're sitting in a comfortable seated posture with the legs crossed, then make sure that you're sitting up high enough so that there's no tension in the low back or the hips while you sit up nice and tall. To get started, take your hands along the sides of your hips, whether it's on your blanket stack or your heels, or maybe even just reaching towards the floor. As you take a few breaths, start to roll the shoulders back and lift the whole front of the body up. Let the neck be soft so that it feels as if the chin was floating parallel to the floor. You can allow your eyes to soften and close, releasing any gripping or tension that might be held in the eyes, lips, or jaw. On your next inhale, bring the hands together in Namaskar. The elbows lift slightly. Use that gentle resistance and pressure in the palms to roll the shoulders back again. Notice how the fronts of the chest, how the collarbones start to spread from the very center of your sternum out to the shoulders. Gently lengthen and deepen your inhale and exhale. Feel as though you can breathe into the sides of your rib cage, back of the rib cage, just as much as the chest lifts. We'll start class today by chanting 3 Ohms together as a group. Let's start with an inhale. Notice if any subconscious tension started to rise in the face or neck, maybe even in the legs. See if you can let it go. Keeping the chest, keeping the side waists lifting nice and tall. At the end of your next exhale, bring your chin down to the chest, surrendering the head to the heart, intellect to intuition. And slowly release the hands to the thighs. Lift your head and open the eyes. We'll go ahead and come forward. You can stretch the legs if you're in Virasana, or if your legs are crossed, you can come to a kneeling position and grab a block. I'll show you where we're headed and then we'll do together. So we're just gonna do some hip warm-ups. If you don't have a block, just having something that you can essentially squeeze between the knee and the thigh is what we're gonna use today. So I'm gonna start by laying on my side here, and you can come up with whatever props you might need to do this comfortably. Sometimes if the head feels like it's hanging off to the side like this, maybe having some support underneath the head is beneficial. Maybe you're fine without it. I have one hand flat to the floor. My other leg, I'm gonna try and straighten it. And sometimes it's helpful for balance to either have it at a wall, maybe even have it a little bit bent. So if you ever feel like when we're doing this hip stuff that you're gonna fall backwards, then that's where bending the knee or having the foot against the wall is gonna be helpful. Then I'm gonna grab my brick, place it behind my knee here. So I'm squeezing my calf to my thigh. If you need something that's a little bit thicker, then you can go ahead and grab that for knee tension specifically is what comes to mind. Or you can even have just a little rolled blanket. But the idea is that we're starting to feel that squeezing sensation of the calf moving towards the thigh. Then from here, we're gonna do a couple of different hip exercises or hip mobility exercises. So I'm gonna start with my thighs together, knees are in line with each other, and my foot is back. From here, I'm lifting my leg up. So I'm not really turning my ankle in any direction or turning my knee. I'm just lifting the thighs away from each other. I'm gonna try and keep that top thigh hovering over the bottom thigh and turn my leg so that now the heel, the knee, and the hip are all hovering over that down leg. So again, lifting the thighs apart, turning that leg in, and then I'm gonna take the knee forward and back. So we're making these hip circles essentially, really challenging the mobility here. Forward and back. So if you don't have something to put in here, or the block is uncomfortable, then definitely going to that blanket might be most beneficial. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's start on whatever side you're on, but just keep in mind that my direction for left and right might be a little bit different, so I'll try to avoid those. But we're gonna reference the bottom leg and the down leg. So the bottom leg, nice and straight, pressing against the wall, or very specifically pressing against the floor. Then have your top thigh in line with that bottom thigh. I'll just lift it up and lift it down. It's kind of like you're doing Jane Fonda leg lifts, right? Now this next time that you lift it up, hold it up, keep that thigh hovering over the bottom thigh, and turn your heel now so that it's in line with that bottom thigh. And then turn it back out. So now the thighs are hovering and back down. We're just kind of breaking down this hip rotation step by step. Then do some more leg lifts, thighs pull away from each other. Once that top thigh is lifted, turn the heel so that it's in line with the bottom thigh. Now take the leg forward. Pull it back. So top thigh is in line with the bottom thigh, still squeezing that block in. And we'll do that one more time. A couple of leg lifts just to get that hip warmed up a little bit. So the thighs move away from each other. Just lifting that top thigh away. Then hold the top thigh up. Keep it in line with the bottom thigh, but now we're turning the heel in line with that thigh. And then we're gonna take the leg forward and down. And then as we pull it back, now the thighs come back in line with each other. Now we're gonna do the other direction. So knee comes forward, then pull it up. The heel, knee, and thigh are in line with the bottom thigh. Now this is where things can really practice that mobility, is keeping that top thigh in line with the bottom thigh and turn the top heel back, trying to keep those thighs in line with each other, and then bring the thigh down. And one more time, squeezing that calf into the thigh, top thigh, bringing the knee forward, then lifting the leg up, heel, hip, it's all hovering over the bottom leg. Now I want to keep that top thigh in line with the bottom thigh as I turn that top heel back and come back down. All right, so then you can remove that block and we're gonna do the other side. I'm gonna switch around here. Laying on the floor, you can have that arm straight or supporting your head, whichever is most comfortable for you. Feel as though you have enough support on that lower body so that you feel stable. Also using my other hand to kind of support the front of my body. So just starting with the thighs parallel to each other, top thigh hovering over the bottom thigh. Let's do a couple of leg lifts here, pinching that block with the calf, with the thigh. And here we're just lifting the thighs apart. You're probably gonna start to feel that outer hip already activate doing this. Then hold it up, turn the thigh so that the heel, knee, and thigh now come in line with the bottom leg. And then turn it back. So top thigh, bottom thigh are in line with each other, and then bring it down. And again, lifting that thigh away, turning the hips. This is an external rotation. Heel, knee, and hip are hovering over that bottom thigh. And we're gonna take the leg forward and then pull it back by taking the knee towards the bottom heel. One more time, lifting that thigh away. External rotation, turning the hip out. Now that whole upper leg is hovering over the bottom thigh. Keeping that bend in the knee, we're just gonna take that knee forward and then back. Eyes are together. Block keeps slipping a little bit with these pants. Now the other way, taking the knee forward, then lifting it up. So we already have that heel, knee, hip angle. Now keeping the thighs in line with each other, parallel to each other, we're gonna turn that top heel back and then bring it down. One more time, knee forward, lifting that leg up, turning that heel back, thighs still in line with each other, and then bringing the thigh down. Awesome. Then you can remove your block and come up to sit. We're gonna do some stuff with the shoulders now. And so I want you to be either laying on two blocks that are gonna be across the upper back, or you can take one of your blankets, roll it, unfold it once, and then roll it. And we're gonna lay on this rolled blanket so that it's along the spine, just like that. So depending on what kind of props you have and how many props you have, you can do either of those types of supports. I'm gonna show with the blocks because it's a little bit easier to see what areas we're really wanting to focus on as we do this next practice. And then once I'm done demonstrating, I'll switch to the rolled blanket. So if you're using blocks, we're gonna have the blocks kind of creating an equal sign. So their long edges are parallel to each other. You don't need to be near a wall, although my mat is already set up to be there. Now, as I start to lean back, I want to feel that this is in my upper back, that this is really supporting across my shoulder blades. And you can adjust how tall that block needs to be that's under your head so that you're not feeling any discomfort in the back of the neck here. This block that's between my shoulder blades and near my upper back is more so closer to the bottoms of the armpits as opposed to the bottoms of the rib cage here. Once we get to this position, we're gonna take the arms up and overhead and we're just gonna start to do some shoulder rolls here, focusing on squeezing the shoulder blades together and then spreading them, squeezing and spreading. And then as we start to roll some shoulders, we're just adding some movement to that. So we'll roll in both directions and we'll straighten the legs, take the arms up and overhead, and then we'll lace the fingers together for Ardha Uttanasana, and again, take the arms up and overhead. Once we've done each side, we'll come down. We'll probably rest for a few breaths with the legs straight, arms on the floor, and then coming up, having the arms underneath us for support to push ourselves up to sit. So that's what we're up to. The rolled blanket is quite nice since you can kind of feel like your shoulder blades are gripping and squeezing onto that rolled blanket. But again, the blocks are very firm and a wonderful support as well. So whatever props you have nearby, whether it's your rolled blanket or your blocks, go ahead and set them up down the center of your mat. The rolled blanket's gonna move down the spine. If you have a foam roller, this is also nice to do on that foam roller. And if you have the blocks, they're kind of creating this equal sign. Now, if you're using the blankets, we really just want the rib cage to be supported. So we don't want this support to move into the low back. So as you come to lay down with the feet on the floor, knees towards the ceiling, and bring your hands behind you, lower yourself onto the props of your choosing. If you're on the blanket, make sure it's just the rib cage and up that's supported. And if you're on the blocks, notice how that block under your shoulder blades is pretty high on the back. It's definitely closer to the bottoms of the armpits than the lower rib cage. Make sure that you have enough support under your head so that the head and the neck can be soft. And I didn't really show this, but I trust that you can kind of follow along. Go ahead and place your hands under your head. Use your thumbs to find your occiput so you can trail the sides of your neck along the sides of the spine, and see if you can find that little divot where the neck connects to the base of the skull. And as you just give a little gentle length, caressing the back of the head, see if you can start to soften and let go of any tension that might be held in the back of the neck there. And with the feet flat on the floor, reach your fingertips up towards the ceiling. And we're just going to start by opening the shoulder blades and then squeezing the shoulder blades. And so what you should feel is that the shoulders are actually lifting towards the ceiling when the shoulder blades spread. But then as you start to squeeze the shoulder blades in, notice how the shoulders move down to the floor. You almost feel like you're trying to squeeze that prop that's behind you in your upper back. Then spreading the shoulder blades, squeezing the shoulder blades. Do this a couple of times, getting the shoulders warmed up. Notice if the neck tenses, if the low back tenses and lifts away from the floor. See if you can use that gentle pressure of your heels down, feet down into the floor while you do this with your shoulders. Now adding some rotation. So now we're going to try and make circles with our shoulders. You can start to lift them up towards your ears and then lift the shoulders towards the ceiling and towards the hips, and then squeezing the shoulder blades so that they move down to the floor. On your own accord, you can move just a few more rotations, and then we'll switch directions. Whichever direction you were going before, now try to roll them in the opposite direction. Notice if there's any changes, whether it's in the neck, the shoulders themselves. Just a few more. All right. Then you can straighten your legs, pressing the heels away from you, and reach the arms up and overhead. Now that you have this fresh awareness of what's happening in the shoulders, try to squeeze the shoulder blades together and pull the shoulders away from the ears. You can even do a couple rotations here with arms up and overhead, although it does take a little bit of muscular effort to hold the arms up. As you take a few breaths here, soften the sides of the neck, soften the face and the eyes. And bring your hands up in line with your gaze. Lace the fingers together. Press the palms away and reach your arms up and overhead. Upward bound finger pose. Ardha Uttanasana. You press your heels down into the floor, lift the chest up. Even though the arms are reaching away from your body, see if you can keep the shoulder blades squeezing in towards each other, the shoulders moving away from the ears. And then bringing the hands back in line with your gaze. Notice which pinky is on the loose end. Switch the grasp of the fingers. As you turn your palms to face the ceiling, making the arms stick straight, Reach the arms up and overhead. As you press the heels down, lift the side waists, lift the chest up. Then notice what the shoulders are doing here. Even though the hands and arms are reaching away from the shoulders, there is still this slight resistance to draw the shoulder blades into the socket. You should feel as though the shoulder blades are squeezing and moving away from the ears. And then bring your hands back in line with your gaze. You can unlace the fingers, rest the hands along your sides, and start to relax. If it's comfortable for your low back, you can even let the feet splay, letting go of any effort in the body. As you breathe while resting on these props, see if you can use your breath to shape your body, shape your spine, but bring props into their form. And so as you breathe, rather than the back hardening into the blocks or the rolled blanket, see if you can use your breath to actually shape your spine, shape your trunk to those props, to invite them into your form, into the shape of your spine. Notice if there's any tension in the neck that can be released and let go of. And then you can slowly start to bend your knees. Either bring the hands underneath you and push yourself up, or if you're on a blanket, you might even be able to roll off to the side before pressing yourself up to sit. Now we're going to move into Mukha Svanasana with our hands on some blocks and at the wall. You have some options here. We're going to support the head in Mukha Svanasana, or downward facing dog. We're also going to have the hands on some blocks if you're in downward facing dog, and those blocks are going to be against the wall. If you're limited on props, then you're going to practice Ardha Uttanasana with the hands at the wall. So I'm going to start by demonstrating Ardha Uttanasana. You can imagine as if my mat was cleared off. I'm going to place my hands at the wall near my hip height. Walk my feet back so that my heels are underneath my hips and my arms are in line with my shoulders, which are in line with my hips, so that the whole spine is parallel to the floor here. So we'll just rest here in Ardha Uttanasana, and then to come out, walking forward and coming up to stand. Now, if you're in downward facing dog with your hands on the blocks, you can take the blocks wide, have them wedged against the wall, and then you'll want some support that's folded underneath your trunk, because we're going to let the head rest on that. When the hands come to the blocks, the wrists are slightly forward from the shoulders, knees are slightly back from the hips. I'm going to curl my toes under, lift the hips up, and you'll notice it's a little bit easier to get the heels down, and we'll support the head as we might need to rest it. You might have to come out, make an adjustment to the height of your props. I'll turn mine this way. And then I'll come back in and again check that height so that you can feel that the head is soft while we're here in Ardha Mukha Svanasana for a few breaths, for a few moments. You can also, you can take the space between your index finger and your thumb against the wall as well, if that feels a little bit more stable for you. And so hands are still on the blocks, spreading that thumb and index finger, curling the toes under, lifting the hips up for a nice supported Ardha Mukha Svanasana. You can pick which position is best for you today. And you'll go ahead and start to come into it. So having your props underneath your chest, You can bring your hands to the blocks, maybe even against the wall. And wrists slightly forward from the shoulders, knees slightly back from your hips. Curl the toes under and lift the hips up. And take your feet wide today, as wide as the mat. Just start for a moment by lifting the heels up. So you lift the hips up. With that lift of the heels, try to make the sit bones nice and sharp. You should feel as though the bottom of the spine and the pelvis is lifting and directing the base of the spine upward. And try to keep that lift in the backs of the legs as you bring your heels to the floor. You notice that you could use some support underneath the head or to support the neck a little bit more, and you can come out and go ahead and grab that. Otherwise, as you take a few breaths here, press the palms down, turn your inner arms up, outer arms down to the floor. Observe what's happening to the shoulder blades. See if you can squeeze them together and move the shoulders away from the ears. As you gently lengthen your inhale and exhale, try to keep this activity in the body, with the neck soft, throat soft. During these last few breaths, observe what support you can give to your arms so that the neck can let go. And then you can come down to your knees. The knees wide, bring the toes together, sit back on the heels. You can pull the support that was underneath your trunk for downward facing dog, pull it in between the legs and lay down forward. So Ardha Mukha Virasana, downward facing hero's pose with a little support under our body. And then you can push yourself up and come up to stand. We're going to set up for Prasarita Padottanasana. So taking the feet wide and letting the head hang forward from there. You can have a nice stack of props to rest your head on for this pose. I'm going to pull my mat away from the wall a little bit. So this is where a side of a couch, or maybe even a yoga chair, can be beneficial. Blocks are great to support underneath the hands if you normally have tension in the shoulders. But since we are supporting the head, you also might need a nice stack of blankets, bolsters, and blocks. The blankets are a little bit softer, so if you are using a block, I'd recommend that you actually have a blanket on top of it if your head is going to be on it. These are a couple examples of what you might have under the head, maybe a blanket on top of a block, maybe a stack of blankets, perhaps even a yoga chair or a sofa couch arm, maybe a kitchen table with a blanket on it, just some sort of ledge. Because what we're gonna do is bring the hands down with the feet nice and wide, take a few breaths here. We're gonna start by taking the hands forward and letting the head hang. I still have my heels and hips in line with each other. So in Ardha Mukha Svanasana, the hips are forward from the heels. In Prasarita Padottanasana, hips and heels are in line. And then from here, we'll bring the hands in line with the feet. Now you might notice that you can drop your support a little bit more. Feel free to do that. We do want that back of the neck to be nice and long, just like we felt when we lengthened the sides of our neck with our hands. So you can go ahead and grab what support you might need to make all of this happen. And once you're ready, we'll start by taking the legs wide. Heels can come in line with the back edge of the mat. That can be a nice reference to see that the heels are in line with each other and how to position the hips. And with your hands on your hips, bend forward. You can bring your hands down to the floor. Just do a little test here, walking the hands forward. You may or may not have enough support for under your head, but this is where you'll be able to tell. So you walk your hands forward, 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 spreading the side waist so that it gets nice and long. Press the outer foot bone down, outer heel down. You should feel stable under your feet. And with every inhale and every exhale, start to turn inward. Observe what your body is doing in the arms, and the shoulder blades, and the neck. You can adjust your props if you need to. Bring the hands back in line with the shoulders. Now we're going to want to stick with that height. We're going to walk the hands forward. Let the head hang. Feel that the side waists are long. And then as you keep your head low, keep the side waists long. Bring your hands in line with your feet. Notice if any of that length in the side waists was lost as you bring your chest a little bit more in line with the hips. So we still want the side waists to be long here, just as if you were stretching forward. Top of the head is supported. There's a little bit of activity in the arms to keep the shoulders out of the ears. But see if you can feel how the rest of your spine is just draping to the floor with the support of the legs and the hips. As you gently lengthen your inhale and exhale, fill the sides of the rib cage. You can make the side waist and the spine long, not only by reaching the chest towards the floor, but also by starting to extract the low back away from the hips. And so as you press the outer foot bone down, legs are nice and strong as the sit bones lift up. See if you can start to breathe a little bit deeper into the lower back, lower spine. Start to pull the low back away from the hips. In India, they use the term extract. You might notice yourself get a little bit longer. So feel free to adjust your props as you might need to, so that the spine never stops growing, never feels inhibited by the props. During these last few moments, notice if there's any support you can give in the legs or in the shoulders so that the spine could be long. Maybe observe if there's any unnecessary tension that can be let go of. And then you'll reach your chest forward. You can walk your hands back underneath the shoulders. The legs feel quite stretched. You can heel toe, step the feet in a little bit, and then place the hands on the hips and come up to stand. Now we're going to move into bridge pose, but I want you to have plenty of support for this Setu Bandha Sarvangasana. If you have a strap nearby, then that would be great. This is where your bolster and blanket stack is going to be quite nice. So having some support under the rib cage and the hips is really what we're aiming for. I've unfolded a blanket once from shelf fold, and I'm going to fold it in half lengthwise. So I'm essentially adding just another layer of support on top of my bolster here. Now, depending on how comfortable you are with back bends or how often you've practiced this, might change how much support you're going to add to your back to lay on. Kind of show you where we're headed if you're not familiar with this pose. I have 2 blankets and a bolster, and then I'm going to use my blocks to support underneath my heels. I'm putting my blocks here at the end of my mat. If you have a strap, you can go ahead and grab that. Nice support for the legs. If you don't, no worries. So if you have a strap, we'll place a loop in it. Setu Bandha Sarvangasana to form a bridge pose. So I'll show just really briefly specific things that we want for alignment. So I'm starting sitting on the kind of the tail end of my bolster. I'm going to strap my thighs together, really strapping near the middle of my thighs. I want this to be tight enough so that my legs feel supported, but loose enough so that they don't necessarily feel like they're being constricted or losing circulation in any way. And from here, I can take my hands behind me and lay back. Might start with my head hanging off and my shoulders on the blanket stack. And just centimeter by centimeter, you can see I'm holding the back of my head here. And I'm gonna try and curl my upper back over that edge of the bolster so that the edge of the bolster and blanket stack actually lifts the bottoms of my shoulder blades. Tops of the shoulders may come down to the floor. Then I can start to pull my hands out from the back of my head, lengthening the back of the neck, and rest the hands on the floor. And we'll straighten the legs. And ultimately, we do want the heels to come in more in line with the hips and the chest. So you can even lift the bricks up a little bit of a height. But that's a nice addition to have, is that the whole lower body, bottom of the rib cage is on the same level, while the tops of the shoulders are rolling and curling off the edge of that bolster. You can rest the hands in this hold them up style position, or just rest them along the sides of the hips, whatever's most comfortable for you. Now, when coming out of this, I'm going to bring my feet to the floor. I'm going to push myself off just a little bit and then lift my hips. And now I can just push the bolster blanket stack out from underneath my hips and lay flat on the floor for a few breaths. And so that's how we'll come out today. And then roll to the side and we'll press ourselves up and move on. So you might have to do a little bit of improving if you don't have these props in particular. But really focusing on having a little bit of ledge to roll the tops of the shoulders off onto, and making sure that the hips and the lower rib cage are supported. If you really just don't have that many props, you can lay down flat on the floor with something in the upper back and underneath the head, so that you're kind of doing this little bit of a back bend position is ideally what we're wanting. So that's also an option. So moving into Setu Bandha Sarvangasana, form a bridge pose. We'll start with the feet flat on the floor, knees bent, and strap the thighs if that's what you're doing today. Then hands go along the sides of the bolster behind you. You can start to lower yourself down, and then bring your hands to the back of the head. Now, as you come down, try to curl the upper back over that edge of the bolster or blanket stack. And you're gonna just shift centimeter by centimeter until you feel that edge of the blanket stack or bolster is supporting the shoulder blades, the bottom tips of the shoulder blades. You might even feel the tops of your shoulders come to the floor. And with your hands underneath your head, lengthen the back of the neck. And you can bring your hands off to the side, stretching one leg at a time, nice and straight. You might notice that props can be adjusted. Make sure that you're feeling supported. And as you take a few breaths, start to let go. Feel your weight settle onto the props. Gently lengthening your inhale and exhale. During these last few moments, observe your body as an entire unit. And then we'll start to come out. Start by bringing your feet flat to the floor. And push yourself off your support stack a little bit. And lift the hips up. And try to push those props out from underneath you. You can lay down with the spine flat on the floor. You can unstrap your legs if you're using a strap. And take your right arm up and overhead. Roll to your side. And press yourself up to sit. We're going to set up for Supta Baddha Konasana, reclined bound angle pose. So you have some more options with this as well. If you're wanting a lot of support and you have enough props to do so, and we'll have a bolster underneath the rib cage and a blanket underneath the head. However, you can also practice this just laying flat on the floor with some support under your head, if that's what you would prefer. We are going to lay down in Shavasana, corpse pose after this, where we just lay flat on the floor. Or if you have support under your back, you're welcome to leave that there and just straighten the legs. There's a bunch of different types of support you can use. Placing the legs in bound angle pose. Sometimes people use a strap. I personally like to use a rolled blanket, but you can also use some blocks. And so if you're really just needing that restoration where you don't want to feel like you're doing very much work at all, I recommend the blocks. Before I show with the blanket and how to use a little makeshift strap, I want to point out that when we use the blocks, we kind of tilt the block slightly. And so there's a flat edge that's supporting the outer thigh. Now what you'll notice is that the thigh, there's no stretch whatsoever in the inner thigh. It's very, very restful, very, very supportive. So that's an option, is using the blocks on that medium height and just supporting it under the sides of the thighs. Now, if you do feel like you need some stretching on the inner legs, maybe you've been sitting a lot, walking a lot, standing a lot, or even if you're a runner, it can be nice to get that little stretch in. So I've unfolded my blanket quite wide. I've unfolded it twice now from shelf fold, and I'm going to roll the long edge. And now this rolled blanket is long enough for me to set on the tops of my feet, sweep along the floor, and actually tuck right near my hip. So this is the support that I generally will use when I have enough props. Again, there's tons of variations on what you can do. Just depends on the props you have access to and what you're kind of looking to feel today. So main key points, we can go ahead and get in this together once you find the support that you'd like. If you're using the blanket as a strap, have it pinned under your hips. Take the hands behind you and start to lower yourself down to the floor or to the support underneath you. Make sure that if you are using support underneath you, it's really just under the upper body. So primarily the rib cage. You should feel like the low back is free. You can take your hands, scoop the flesh of the buttocks away from your back. If you're using the blocks under the thighs, there's nothing really holding the feet in. But if you're using the blanket or a strap around the ankles, then you can lift the knees and start to pull the tail ends of the blanket in a little bit more and rest the legs off to the side. Supta Baddha Konasana, reclined bound angle pose. As you take a few breaths here, settling into the support. Feel free to use your hands under your head to lengthen the back of the neck. Should feel as though the back of the neck, the back of the head can be soft and long. And as you gently lengthen your inhale and exhale, feel your body settling into the props. As you gently lengthen your inhale and exhale, notice how the pace of your breath starts to slow down. As we start to end class, for Shavasana, you're welcome to choose one of three different poses or variations of Shavasana. First, you're welcome to stay here. You feel comfortable and as if you're not ready to move. Or you can straighten the legs. If you have some support underneath you, can continue to rest in a supported Shavasana with the legs straight. Or that third option is a more traditional Shavasana, in which you can roll to your side, move your props out of the way, laying down flat on the floor with a support underneath the head and the neck. Whichever position you find yourself in, notice if there was any tension that started to rise subconsciously or from moving, and see if you can let it go. As you exhale, let go of everything, everywhere. As you gently lengthen your inhale and exhale, bring your focus back to your body, back to your breath. Notice if any subconscious tension started to rise. And see if you can let it go as you settle into your props or the floor. As you gently lengthen your inhale and exhale, breathe fully. Slowly place your hands on your abdomen, on your belly. Take a moment to appreciate your body for all that it's done and all that it will do. Appreciate your mind for taking the time to practice and harmonize with your body today. Feel gratitude for your heart, for being that organ in the center of your chest, dedicated to life. As we start to come up, you can take your time. Start by bending the knees, reaching your right arm up and overhead. As you roll to your right side, take a few breaths here with your head resting on your upper arm or hand under the head. As you come up to a comfortable seated posture, feel free to use the props around you to sit comfortably. I appreciate you all for taking the time to practice yoga today. And thank you for taking the time to practice with me. Namaste. Thank you for joining me. It's great to have you. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, I hope you all have a great rest of your day.